I used to think that nothing was worse than indifference. But I was wrong. There are things more insidious, more subtle, that destroy trust silently and cruelly. I didn't know that when we set off for Carmel by the sea. I just thought I was heading into a memorable family vacation. A chance. A fresh start. I laughed while packing my suitcase, excited as I booked the room, and even picked out my favorite dress, just to make a better impression on my future mother-in-law. That's right, Brian and I had been married for less than 2 years, but this was the first time I'd gone on a long trip with his parents, Mr. Henry and Mrs. Margaret. They were retired, living in a small town in Oregon, and seemed to hold on to that strict, old-fashioned lifestyle I always tried to understand. But I believed that as long as I was genuine, they would eventually accept me as a real part of the family. Brian told me not to worry, just be yourself, they'll like you. But I didn't want to just be liked. I wanted to be seen. I wanted a place. We drove down to California early Saturday morning. Brian, 35, tall, quiet, was in the driver's seat, and I sat beside him, holding 2 cups of hot coffee. The 6.5-hour drive seemed to pass quickly, as I got lost imagining the sunsets we'd watched together. The beach walks, the cozy dinners, full of laughter and white wine. I pictured myself sitting next to Margaret, picking dishes, talking about books, flowers, life. Carmel looked like something out of a painting, a seaside town with slanted rooftops, cobblestone streets, and the salty breeze. We had booked a small hillside resort with a private path down to the white sand beach. From our bedroom balcony, I could hear the gentle sound of waves crashing, like my own heart at the time, full of hope and anticipation. We were supposed to meet the family at the resort at 4 p.m. When Brian and I arrived, Mr. Henry and Mrs. Margaret were already in the lobby, checking their watches. Margaret wore a cream linen dress, light makeup, and a small pearl necklace around her neck. She didn't smile when she saw me. She looked at Brian, then glanced at me so quickly I almost missed it. "You're 12 minutes late, Brian," she said, her voice calm and cold. Brian gave a faint smile and shrugged. "Traffic, Mom." I smiled and reached out my hand. "I've been looking forward to meeting you both. Thank you for giving me the chance to join this trip." Margaret gave a slight nod. Henry said nothing, just handed Brian a small paper bag, their favorite bourbon. As for me, I didn't even get a glance. I tried not to let it bother me. Maybe they just needed more time. Maybe I was being too sensitive. That evening we went to a French restaurant by the sea, warm yellow lights glowing through the large windows. A table had been reserved for 4. I was excited, walking in with everyone. But as we neared the table, Margaret suddenly stopped and turned to the waiter. "Excuse me, I think there's a mistake. We need a table for 3, she needs her own." I froze. "Excuse me." She didn't look at me, still speaking to the waiter. "Her, Brian's wife, will sit at the next table. It's our tradition." Brian said nothing. I turned to him. "Did you hear that?" He avoided my eyes. "It's just their way. Please, just go along with it, okay?" It felt like someone had pulled the rug out from under me. I don't remember how I walked over to the separate table. I just remember my fingers trembling as I held the menu. And I remember the waiter's eyes, awkward, pitying, as he poured water into my glass without saying a word. At that moment, I still tried to believe that it was just some strange misunderstanding, a quirky tradition, a one-time thing. I had no idea it was only the prelude to a nightmare, and I, Victoria, had only just sat down at my table. Alone. I sat there, in the elegant space of the seaside restaurant, the candlelight flickering on my table doing nothing to ease the tight ache in my chest. My table was only a few steps away from theirs, but I had never felt distance stretch so far. The 3 of them, Brian, Margaret, and Henry, laughed and chatted softly like nothing was wrong. Brian glanced over once in a while, but never long enough for me to catch his gaze. He quietly ate his pan-seared veal, while I I was chewing on something that had no flavor, no scent, no feeling except a lump stuck in my throat. I tried texting him, "Can you come talk to me for a bit?" No reply. I put the phone down, the suffocating feeling growing stronger by the minute. The waiter placed a glass of wine in front of me, forcing a smile, then quickly turned away as if not wanting to be drawn into whatever emotion was smoldering at my lonely table. Of course, who wants to get caught in a family drama? I wondered if this was some kind of test. A way for them to teach me my place in the family. But who treats their daughter-in-law like a stain to be scrubbed out? I'm not overly sensitive, but this wasn't my imagination. They were deliberately excluding me, and Brian, he was the silent accomplice. I stood up mid-meal and walked over to their table. My voice was low but clear. "Can I sit with you?" Margaret looked up and gave a faint smile. "Here is your translated text in American English, with no additions." "Victoria, don't make a big deal out of it. Our family is used to sitting a certain way. You already have your own table." I clenched my fists. "I'm not a guest. I'm Brian's wife. And this is a family dinner." Mr. Henry let out a faint snort. "At home, you're husband and wife. But on vacation, everyone has their own space. You should respect our family's culture." I turned to Brian, trying to hold back the bitterness. "You're okay with this?" He quietly set down his knife and fork. "You know it's just how they are. Don't make it harder than it needs to be." I stood frozen, cold from the back of my neck down to the soles of my feet. A wave of shame surged through me, even stronger than my anger. By now the whole restaurant had probably figured out what was going on. I had become a silent play, unfolding under the curious eyes of strangers. Without saying another word, I walked back to my table. Head down, I tapped my fingers lightly on the surface, reminding myself not to cry, not here, not in front of them. Dinner ended. I was the first to leave the restaurant. No goodbye hugs, no invitation to the next morning's plans. They walked off in the opposite direction, still chatting and laughing like I had never existed. Back in the room, I went into the bathroom, turned the water up hot, and let the thick steam cover the rising sobs in my throat. I couldn't understand how Brian could be so indifferent. How could he, the man who once held my hand and said, "I'll protect you from everything," be the first to let go when I needed him most? I sat against the side of the tub, hot water trickling from the shower like it could wash away the hurt. But it didn't take anything away. It only made things clearer. That I had entered a game I was never told the rules of. And worse, I had walked in. Alone. That whole night I tossed and turned in the luxury hotel bed. Soft pillows, white sheets, the faint scent of lavender. All of it only made the emptiness feel more brutal. Brian didn't text. Didn't call. And I didn't want to be the one to reach out anymore. Then a thought crossed my mind, sharp as a cold blade. If this is just the first day, how bad will the next ones be? The next morning, I woke up early, dressed neatly in a floral midi dress with my hair tied up. I wanted a fresh start. Even though last night was confusing and hurtful, I still hoped the family was just testing me. Maybe today would be different. I texted Brian. "I'm heading down to the restaurant for breakfast, meet me there." No reply. I waited. 10 minutes. Then 20. Finally, I went downstairs, scanning the room as I entered the restaurant. They weren't there. I called Brian. The phone rang a few times, then cut off. When I found them, all three were seated at an outdoor table, sipping cappuccinos, a plate of buttered bread nearly gone. I froze. The ocean breeze fluttered the hem of my dress, but no one looked up. They chatted and laughed like I didn't exist. I walked over. "I texted you this morning." I looked at Brian. "Why didn't you wait for me?" Mr. Henry didn't look up from his newspaper. "We figured you'd figure it out." Mrs. Margaret took a sip of coffee. "Everyone has their own pace, Victoria. You can't expect people to always wait around." Brian looked at me, his eyes blank. You can eat on your own. I turned away, biting my lip to stop myself from shouting something in his face. But that was just the beginning. That afternoon, after a short walk on the beach, I returned to find our room door wide open. Brian wasn't there. His favorite white shirt and brown loafers were gone from the bed. I called him. No answer. 2 hours later I saw the photo they posted on Facebook, a picture on a yacht, a stunning skyline in the background, white wine sparkling in their glasses. All three were beaming. Me? I found out about their trip because social media told me. I tried to stay calm. I called Brian again. This time he picked up, his voice flat like nothing had happened. What's up? You went on a boat tour without saying anything to me? It was nothing big. You didn't ask. So I have to ask just to remind you I exist? He sighed. Don't overreact. It's just how they do things. I told you already. For the first time, I didn't recognize the man on the other end of the line. The next day I got ready on my own, hoping I could at least join them for the wine tasting in Carmel Valley. I wore an olive green bodycon dress, light makeup, hoping this time I'd be included, but when I came down to the lobby at 10 a.m., no one was there. The receptionist said they had left at 9:15. This time, I didn't call. I just sat in the armchair in the corner of the lobby, staring blankly into the space ahead. Inside me, the feeling was like an old rope stretched too tight. Not quite anger, not quite pain, but a kind of nameless despair, slowly draining every ounce of patience I had. That night, Brian came back to the room close to 11. He took off his tie, dropped himself onto the bed like nothing had happened. Are you planning to stay mad the whole vacation? I turned to look at him, my voice no longer trembled. I'm not mad. I've moved past that. Now I just feel empty. He sat up, frowning. You always expect too much from people. They've tried. I laughed, a hollow laugh, with not a hint of joy. They tried? Do you even hear yourself, Brian? Hansa didn't answer, just turned his face away like he hadn't heard a thing. Like he'd been doing all week. I lay back on the bed, eyes on the ceiling. The scent of sea salt lingered in the air. But to me now, Carmel wasn't a dreamy seaside town anymore. It was a beautiful prison, where I was abandoned under the guise of being a not good enough wife. And then, in the darkness, I whispered to myself, if this is how they live, then I'll have my own way. And I promise, they'll never forget. I sat in the room dazed, the dim light from the bedside lamp casting my shadow on the pale gray wall. Small, silent, and completely erased from the story I was supposed to be part of. Brian was in the shower. The steady sound of water behind the half-closed door was a heartless soundtrack to the chaos in my mind. I had had enough. Enough to know that this wasn't a mistake. Or a forgetful moment. Or just bad timing. Every action had intent. Every time they left me behind, every averted gaze, every word that denied my presence. All were little blades, and I was bleeding. But I didn't come here to be humiliated. I paid for this entire trip, the hotel, the car rental, the restaurant reservations, even the spa day Margaret had been raving about for months. They didn't know that because I never bragged. But now? Now I'd let them feel the worth of what they took for granted. I opened my laptop, pulled up the reservation confirmation emails. Each link appeared under the cursor like a knot ready to be cut. I started canceling one by one, their hotel room, the SUV they were using, the reservation at the fancy Italian restaurant, and even Margaret's full-body spa treatment scheduled for the next morning. It took less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes to dismantle something I'd spent weeks putting together. I didn't stop there. I immediately booked a luxurious suite at a beachfront resort in Charleston, nearly a 3-hour drive away. It was peaceful, elegant, and most importantly, not a single person named Brian, Henry, or Margaret nearby. I packed my suitcase neatly, double-checked my phone, wallet, passport, then stepped out of the room. Before closing the door, I looked back at the room one last time. No regret. Not even a little. The rental car was still parked in the lot, and I had the keys. I got in, started the engine, and drove off into the quiet night of Carmel. Street lights slipped behind me, one by one, like waving goodbye, as I escaped that velvet prison. Around 2 a.m., I arrived in Charleston. The front desk clerk was just as welcoming as in the daytime, escorting me to the top-floor suite. The room was warm, elegant, with large glass windows overlooking the ocean under the night breeze. I took off my shoes, stepped onto the thick carpet, pulled the curtain aside, and sat in the armchair, pouring myself a glass of wine from the minibar. For the first time in days, I exhaled deeply. I set my phone down beside me, on silent, but minutes later it started buzzing. Brian. Then Margaret. Then Henry. I didn't pick up. I didn't owe them an explanation. They wanted me invisible? Then I would disappear. But not in the way they expected. I took a sip of wine, eyes gazing out at the inkback sea. I imagined the three of them waking up, stepping out of their rooms and being stopped by hotel management. I pictured Margaret screaming when she found out her spa session was cancelled. Mr. Henry growling in frustration over the fancy dinner that was no more. And Brian? Maybe he was pulling at his hair, calling me non-stop, trying to drag me back, like nothing had happened. I smirked. They used to think I was weak, that I would always stay quiet. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't a decoration in their vacation. I was the one who built it all, and I just tore it down. Without hesitation. And here I am, starting my own vacation. With no one manipulating me, no one ignoring me, no one stripping away my worth. Now let's see how they manage. I woke up in the sunlit suite in Charleston, the smell of fresh coffee from the auto brewer blending with the soft sound of waves outside the balcony. A sense of peace wrapped around me like a warm blanket after a storm. No knocking on the door, no passive-aggressive comments, no condescending looks aimed my way. Just me. And freedom. The phone was still silent, only because I had it on Do Not Disturb. Curious, I checked my missed calls. 12 from Brian, 6 from Margaret, 3 from Mr. Henry. The messages came in rapid succession. Where are you? Victoria, what is going on? What did you cancel? Call me back right now. I smirked and took a sip of coffee. So now they finally knew what it felt like to be ignored. By noon, unable to resist the curiosity, I opened one of Brian's voicemails. His voice was strained, a mix of anger and desperation. Where did you go? What the hell did you do? We got kicked out of the room this morning. They said the reservation was cancelled. The car's gone too. The spa said Margaret isn't on the list anymore. Do you know how my mom reacted? You ruined everything. Call me back now. I leaned back in the armchair and laughed, not out of joy, but from the relief of lifting a weight off my chest. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I had just been pushed to the edge. Brian called one more time. I answered, for the first time in 2 days. Where are you? His voice was sharp. Charleston, I said calmly, like I was talking about the weather. Charleston, you left in the middle of the night without saying a word? Well, I figured my way was to take care of myself, just like your family's way is to abandon people. Seems fair. I could hear Margaret yelling faintly in the background, mixed with Henry cursing. Brian lowered his voice, trying to stay composed. You don't understand. We had plans. We had a vacation. You left us with no room, no car, no nothing. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? That was me 3 days ago. Are you trying to hurt us? No, I'm just giving back exactly what I got. There was a pause, then he whispered. You really canceled everything? One thing at a time. Do you know my mom just made a scene at the spa? They wouldn't let her in. She screamed, cursed out the manager. And my dad is stuck trying to get an Uber in town because no one will pick him up. I chuckled softly. Oh, sounds like a lovely cultural experience. Victoria, don't be childish. Childish? I shot up from the chair, my voice sharp. You dare call me childish after you let me sit alone through 3 meals, be treated like I didn't exist in front of your parents, and never once spoke up for me? They just needed time. 3 days, Brian. And you left me alone without a second thought. Well, congratulations. You and your perfect little family can enjoy the rest of this vacation, somewhere with fluorescent lights and frayed towels. You have to come back. No, I don't owe anyone there a damn thing. What about me? I hesitated. The question hung between us. But then I answered, softly, like a breath. You made your choice, now I've made mine. I hung up and turned off my phone. That afternoon, I booked a massage at the hotel spa, ordered dinner through room service, and opened the balcony doors to watch the sunset spill over the ocean like a ribbon of red velvet. I no longer needed anyone to validate my worth. And somewhere hundreds of miles away, Brian's family was screaming in frustration, finally understanding what it felt like to be shut out of their own world. That afternoon, just as I finished my full-body spa treatment and was sitting on the balcony in a towel relaxing, my phone lit up. A messenger message from a familiar name appeared. Sarah H. Brian's cousin. I frowned. Sarah was quiet, rarely seen at family gatherings, but I had always sensed something different about her. Not as cold as the rest of them. The message read simply, I just heard, and honestly, you did the right thing. I typed back. What are you talking about? A moment later, Sarah replied, longer this time. That you left. That you canceled everything. You probably don't know this. But they did the same thing to Rachel. I froze. Rachel. Brian's ex-wife. The one he used to say was incompatible, overreacted, wasn't flexible with family traditions. I still remember the way Brian sighed when he talked about her. Playing the victim in what he called an amicable divorce. I texted back, my palm suddenly cold despite the Charleston sun. Rachel, what do you mean? Sarah responded without hesitation. I thought you knew. She went on a trip with them once, to Lake Tahoe in 2019. They separated her at meals, ignored her, didn't include her in plans or tell her the itinerary. She left midway through the trip. A month later, she filed for divorce. I let the phone rest on my thigh, eyes staring into the distance. Everything in my head spun like the wind kicking up sand by the ocean. Brian had known. He had seen it happen. He had a chance not to repeat it, to protect me. But he chose silence. I picked up the phone again and typed. Did Brian ever tell you that? Sarah. No, but Rachel once told my mom. She gave details I overheard. I thought you should know. I replied with one last line. Thank you so much. I sat still, hollow inside, not from surprise, but from the realization that I had been deceived through the entire marriage. I remembered the night Brian talked about his ex. The sad expression, the soft voice, the carefully curated story that placed the blame on her. And I, like a fool, believed I'd be different. That I was the better fit. My phone rang again. It was Brian. I hesitated a second, then answered. I know about Rachel, I said plainly, without waiting for a greeting. There was silence for a few seconds, then he exhaled. Who told you? Really, Brian? That's your first question? You're blowing this out of proportion. His tone was starting to turn defensive. Rachel didn't understand, she overreacted. That's just how my family operates. A little different, but not malicious. You let me sit alone, for 3 days, no explanation, no message. And you call that not malicious? You have to be more understanding with my parents, I cut him off. No. You're the one I should have understood first. Because you saw this happen to your ex-wife, and you still let it happen again. No warning, no protection. Just cowardly silence, and those pathetic little shrugs. His voice faltered. I didn't think it would hurt you this much. So you did think about it. You knew it might happen. And you still let me walk into it. He said nothing. I could hear a long sigh on the other end. But right now, I didn't care how he felt anymore. She walked away, Brian, and so will I. The only difference is, this time, you won't get to tell the story your way, because I'm going to tell the truth, every single detail. I hung up, blood rushing to my ears. But it wasn't from anger, it was because I finally saw all the pieces clearly. This wasn't the first time. It wasn't about being incompatible. This was a pattern, a sick habit, protected by silence and willful ignorance. I stood up, pulled the curtains open, and looked at the sea glowing red in the afternoon light. The sky was still beautiful, but this time, I saw it as a blank page, and I, Victoria, was finally holding the pen. At 6 a.m. the next morning, the sharp ring of the phone shattered the stillness of the room. I frowned, eyes barely open, and reached for it. An unfamiliar number was displayed, area code South Carolina. I hesitated a moment, then answered. "Good morning, ma'am. This is Officer Daniels from the Charleston Police Department. We need to verify some information regarding a missing person report filed last night by your husband, Mr. Brian Holloway." I shot upright, my voice dry. "Missing? I'm not missing. I left entirely of my own free will." A brief pause. "So you confirm that you are safe and not being forced to remain away from Carmel?" "Yes. I drove myself to Charleston. I booked a hotel room using my own credit card. I'm fine. And I'm here because I want to be," he said. "You haven't answered his calls or messages and that he was concerned for your safety." I let out a bitter laugh, picking up the glass of water on the table. "He's been calling non-stop, I know, but I have the right not to answer. No one gets to use my silence as an excuse to control me." "I understand. Would you like to file a no-contact request? We can open a report if needed." I sat up straighter, took a deep breath. In that moment, there was no doubt left in my mind. Brian wasn't worried about me. He was just angry about losing control. "Yes, I want to file an official request. No further contact. By phone, message, or in person. And if he continues to pressure me, I will take it further." Officer Daniels confirmed and promised to process the request that same day. I hung up, gripping the phone in my hand. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten. But inside me, a thick fog was lifting. The fog that had hidden who Brian's family really was. Less than an hour later, the first message from Susan arrived. No concern, no checking if I was okay. Just a string of cold accusations. "Susan, I can't believe you did this. You've disgraced our family." I didn't respond. "Susan, Mark had to call the police out of worry. Do you know what this could do to his reputation?" I laughed. In the end, all they cared about was their image. Not one person asked if I was okay. No apologies. Then the third message popped up. Each word as sharp as a blade. "Susan, if you don't come back, Mark will make things very difficult for you." I froze. That wasn't sulking. That wasn't guilt-tripping. That was a clear threat. I reread the message 3 times, each word carving itself into me. I thought they had hit rock bottom. I was wrong. I set the phone down on the table, poured myself a second espresso of the day. My hand trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the anger that had been buried too long finally breaking the surface. I stared at the screen. At the message. "Mark will make things very difficult for you." Did she think I'd be scared? That I'd come crawling back begging for forgiveness? No. I took a screenshot and saved it in a private folder titled simply Evidence. I took a deep breath, opened the Notes app, and typed the first line. "They don't want me gone, they want me broken." And they just made their biggest mistake, thinking I would stay silent. I'm not the kind of person who seeks drama, and I'm certainly not the woman who puts on a show to make a point. But sometimes, silence is just another way of enabling toxicity. And this time, I choose not to stay silent. Monday morning, I reserved a private meeting room at the hotel I was staying in, a glass-walled space overlooking the ocean, long wooden table, leather chairs, sunlight slanting in through the windows. I didn't need theatrics. I just needed honesty. And a chance for all the masks to come off. I sent invitations to all four: Brian, Margaret, Henry, and Sarah. She was the only one in that family I still believed had a shred of conscience. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. By 9:57 I was seated at the head of the table, a folder in front of me with printed messages, screenshots, and key notes. I wasn't shaking. I had never felt calmer in the face of an approaching storm. At 10:03 the door swung open. Brian walked in first, his face dark with anger. Behind him was Margaret, floral dress perfectly in place, eyes cold as ice, and Henry, red-faced, jaw clenched tight. Sarah came in last, cautious eyes, but she gave me a small nod. She sat beside me without a word. Brian slammed his hand on the table. "What the hell is this, Victoria? You think pulling this stunt makes everything okay?" I folded my arms, voice steady. "No, this isn't to make it okay, this is to bring it to an end." Margaret let out a bitter laugh, her voice sharp. "We've had enough of your childish games. You ruined the vacation, dragged in the police, and now you want an end?" I pulled out my phone, turned on the screen and projected her message. "Remember this line. If you don't come back, Mark will make things very difficult for you." That's a threat. "I've saved everything." Henry jumped up, pointing a finger. "That wasn't a threat, it was a necessary warning." "No, it's proof that all of you use power, manipulation and control to silence people," I replied, eyes fixed on Brian. "You know it's true. You saw Rachel go through the same thing, and you let it happen again. To me." Brian swallowed hard. Rachel was different. She didn't try to fit in. No, she was isolated. Just like me. She left quietly. But I'm not leaving without showing the world exactly who your family is. Sarah stayed silent, staring at Margaret, then turned to me and gave a small nod. I knew she was confirming everything I'd said. Brian sighed, ran his hand through his hair. "I can fix this. We can start over, Vic. Forget all this. I'll ask my parents to apologize, if that's what you want." I gave a half smile. "Apologize? After all the damage, you think empty words are enough?" Margaret stood up, voice as sharp as a blade. "You'll regret going against us. You have no idea what this family is capable of." I looked straight at her, unblinking. "Oh, I know exactly. And that's why I won't be part of this family another minute." I took an envelope from my bag and slid it toward Brian. "Divorce papers. I've already signed. You can read them before you sign, but I'm not second-guessing anything." Brian's face went pale. Henry shot up like he'd been shocked. Margaret's mouth fell open, too stunned to speak. I stood, calmly adjusted my blazer. "I don't need anyone's permission, I don't need approval. I just need to reclaim the life you all tried to distort." Brian reached for my arm. "Vic, wait. We can talk. Just you and me." I paused at the door, turned back, voice firm. "We've had years to talk privately, Brian, but every time I spoke you stayed silent. Now be silent. And listen to the sound of me walking away." I opened the door and walked out of that room and that family, for good. 6 months later, the divorce decree was officially granted by the Charleston court. Just one, a 4-sheet, a few signatures, but to me, it was a ticket out of a hell called family. I stood at the door of my new apartment on King Street, 3rd floor, with a small balcony overlooking old oak trees shedding their leaves. It wasn't large, but every square foot was mine. No interference, no judgmental stares, no passive-aggressive sighs when I chose curtain colors or placed flowers on the dining table. I started over. The freelance marketing work I once postponed for the sake of family priorities was now a steady income source. I picked projects on my own terms, working from my favorite coffee shop on the corner, or from the armchair by the window, where morning sunlight streamed in like a soft reminder, You still have yourself. I didn't talk much about the divorce. The people who needed to know already knew. The ones who didn't deserve to. Didn't matter. Sarah was the only person from Brian's side who still kept in touch. She sent the occasional message, a check-in, a few silly cat pictures, and sometimes little updates about the aftermath over there. Brian and his parents are in full-on Cold War, she wrote in one message. Henry called Brian a traitor, and Margaret cried for a week after being exposed in front of the relatives. I replied with just one sentence. I have no regrets. And I wasn't lying. The scariest part wasn't the yelling or the tears. It was the quiet, creeping cold that destroyed you day by day in silence. It was seeing yourself shrink inside a luxury room colder than a freezer. At a dinner table full of dishes where no one looked you in the eye. I lived that way for far too long. And now, I don't anymore. One autumn afternoon, I was trimming plants on the balcony when my phone buzzed. An unknown number, but I recognized it instantly from the name that popped up in the first message. Ryan. I saw it, I know you were right. And I'm sorry. No dear Victoria, no flowery words, just a belated apology. 6 months, and an entire marriage too late. I sat down and read the message 3 times. No tears. No tightening in my chest. Just a light breeze passing through, carrying with it a feeling that it no longer had anything to do with me. I didn't reply. I was no longer the woman who once sat alone at a seaside restaurant, clutching her phone, hoping someone would text, "Where are you?" I was no longer the woman at the separate table, forcing a smile while the world pretended she was invisible. I am Victoria, 32 years old, living in Charleston, in charge of my own life. That evening, I wore a cobalt blue dress, simple heels, and walked into an art exhibit at the newly opened gallery near my home. No one walked beside me. But I didn't feel alone. I spoke with the gallery manager, chatted with a local photographer, and when the glass of wine touched my lips, I knew one thing for sure. I no longer live to please anyone. The message from Brian is still on my phone. Not deleted, not blocked. But never answered. Because my freedom doesn't need to be proven. Doesn't need permission. And certainly, doesn't need explaining. I left. And this time, I won't look back. Victoria's story is a clear reminder that staying silent in the face of disrespect only deepens the wound. When a relationship requires you to sacrifice your self-respect and presence just to be accepted, that's not love. That's manipulation. Victoria chose to stand up, not out of revenge but to reclaim control over her life. In reality, sometimes the boldest move isn't staying and enduring but walking away and living the life you truly deserve. What do you think about Victoria's decision? Would you do the same if you were in her shoes? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful real-life stories and lessons from family relationships.